We're in the troubleshooting phase. I'll tell you what that means. That means I started out with a 5.5 GEDCOM file that was put out by GenBox, which is a program I own, and then I'm importing it as a 5.5.1 because that's the version that I support. And there is not a whole heck of a lot of difference. There's some differences which you can study on your own by looking at the specs and comparing them. I already changed this. This used to be for somebody else. I changed all the names and stuff, and I added stuff for testing purposes. I added, lines that I need to test, and manually added this, that, and the other thing. And then this is the main GEDCOM file that I used during development. I have created a GEDCOM import program. I have created a GEDCOM export program. They both work with this file. In fact, I've taken this file, imported it to TreeBard, this is TreeBard, and then exported it back into a different GEDCOM file with my export program, and then imported that GEDCOM file and exported it again and imported it again, just to show that there's consistency and that things aren't falling apart as it gets imported and exported multiple times. Now, if I do that with something that I didn't by hand monkey with, then there's always a little problem. The import program is finished, and that word finished, it has little old quotationable marks around it, which means finished. Yeah, I wish, but still, it is up to the point where it's finishable, and we're now in the troubleshooting phase. Okay, this is a phase where I import other than this one, which I use during development, and find out what it can't do, what it does wrong, this, that, and the other thing. And the same goes for export program. The export program was easy. I said I could do it in 2 weeks, and I did it in 2 weeks. Of course, there's still, a few things to fiddle around with. Troubleshooting phase, that's where we're at. And one problem that I've been having, I'm going to try to work on this with the camera running. There's this little old tag called FAMC. It is a major pain in the rear end. This is my import program. If you go FAMC in the find and you count the FAMCs, there's 25 of them in this import program, and it's not working right yet. It is. It's doing what I told it to do, okay? But the fact that there's already 25 occurrences of this tag in this file is not a good sign. And probably most of them were in comments saying bad things about it. This is one of the imports that I created a GEDCOM file with the export program and then re-imported it with the import program. And you see that Lloyd F. Teal has parents, Russell and Anita. Now, if you go to Russell, control click, used to be double click, but changed it. If you go to Russell, where's his parents? He has no parents. Well, let me explain that situation. Here in Bill Teal is person number 1. This is Bill Teal's Indy record, that's his person record. We have this. This is subordinate to his 0 Indy record, Indy line, directly subordinate to the individual. This says he's a child in family 2. So Bill is a child in family number 2. And that's all good and well. And also I have to say that this FAMC tag is required by GEDCOM. They don't really give a good reason. They say it's for navigating the pedigree. I don't know what that means exactly. I mean, I could sort of guess and get a vague notion that it might be having something to do with it's used by programs that create charts of pedigrees or ancestor calculators or something like that, but that's just a guess. Now, if you look on down to Lloyd, he has parents and Russell doesn't. Why doesn't Russell have a parent? Because he's got a birth. There's your birth tag, and there's Russell's birth. Okay? Down in Lloyd, we've got this situation too, FAMC. And then if Russell had this, then it'd be like that, okay? Because he is a child of family too, so we can do this. However, this is optional. You see this one, it's a second FAMC tag, and it's directly subordinate to the birth event. And this is the one that actually makes sense in terms of SQL and what SQL needs, in terms of cardinality of relationships. I'm talking about the relationship between an event and a person, for example. So what I'm trying to say is that other FAMC tag that's directly subordinate to the 0 line, it's saying that there's a relationship between FAMC, which is a family pointer referencing family number 2. It's saying that there's a direct relationship between that family, which is a couple, his parents, FAM2 is his parents. It's saying that there's a direct relationship between that couple and the fact that he is an individual. And that's, you could argue that that's true, but in SQL it's not exactly true because you're putting the pointer in the wrong place. In UNIGEDS, you have a person ID that is a foreign key from the person table that is in the events table. And that tells you if you put that person ID in the right row, the row of the events table that refers to the person's birth, then that's how you link a person to their family, because in the same row you will also have the family ID. So in one row of the events table, you're going to have an event ID as the primary key. Then for foreign keys, you're going to have a person ID for the child and a couple ID for the parents, all in the same row. And that's how you do it to get the cardinality right, the relationships between the data. I've been doing this for 5 years, and that's the only way I've found it works really well and works really right. This kind of works, even though we don't have, GEDCOM doesn't have identifiers or 0 lines for events. We can still create this birth, give it an ID, and then put this couple ID on the line for that event, along with the person ID for Bill, who was born. That works. It's at least fairly workable, and the problem here is that Russell doesn't have one. Why? Because this line is optional, so I didn't put one in. The other FAMC is not optional, and I think GEDCOM either got it backwards or they should have required both. And I don't even like to see FAMC used more than once in one record. I think that's ridiculous. They should be 2 different tags. If you look over here, let's see if there's anybody got adopted. I created an extra person here. Now you see there's extra FAMC tags for this guy, and they're both linked to events. These are the optional ones, the good ones. And if you look down somewhere else, there's the required one. You can create your events this way. This is going to create an adoption event. Oh, now you see here we got an adoption tag used for 2 different purposes. This one is subordinate to an FAMC tag, and it says that the wife is the one who adopted him. So you can say husband, you can say wife, or you can say both here. And in my import program, I translated adopt into 2 different tags, one for each of its different usages. This one's always going to be a 1. This one's always going to be a 3. They're completely different. They mean completely different things. And in terms of SQL, they're kind of unrelated. They're related if you think about it, but SQL doesn't think. So that's what you got to imagine when you're writing something like GEDCOM, is that GEDCOM doesn't think. We can look at this with our eyeballs and think about it and figure out what it's trying to say. But a computer can't do that. So we got to write something that's unambiguous. We got to take this GEDCOM, write something that's unambiguous in here in the GEDCOM program, in the import program. We didn't have no problem getting Trevor into this database because we did it the good way. And there's his parents. And there's his other parent. See, we didn't need that line. But I assume there might be a reason, which the GEDCOM specs have not informed us in any very descriptive way what that reason is, why this is required but useless, and this is optional but very useful. There's two events. All right, now the next step is to go in here and figure out how we can use this. Let's go back to the first FAMC tag. Okay, this is Bill. He's person number one. So what I'm needing to do is find some way of saying, well, this is a birth family, because it's the only FAMC tag in Bill's individual record. Therefore, the logic should be, if there's no other FAMC tags, then we're going to call this a birth. So at some point we create a birth for everybody, whether they have a birth tag or not. I showed you the BIRT up above here. Whether they have a birth event or not, in TreeBart and UNIGEDS, we make a birth for everybody. I don't suppose UNIGEDS makes that happen, but TreeBart does, and everybody automatically gets a birth when they're added to the tree at age 0. Then all I got to do is link this couple number 2 to that birth event. And in case I hadn't made it clear, this is correct, where the what I call in UNIGEDS the couple foreign key is subordinate to the event. That's correct. The cardinality is correct. The type of relationship between the couple and the birth event. For each birth, there is one set of parents. For each set of parents, there's one birth. That's a one-to-one relationship. So that couple ID belongs on the event row, the row for that single event, that birth event. So that birth event is going to have an event ID, it's going to have an event type ID that says it's a birth, it's going to have parents, and it's going to have a person. And that person ID for the person that's born is also one-to-one relationship with the event. So it goes on the same row too. But the actual couple, the two people, the two parents, that goes in the couple table. So if I was a writer of GEDCOM, I'd call that the family table, but it's really the couple table. So that means that the problem with the one FAMC is it's subordinate to the individual, and that's wrong, because you can have more than one set of parents. You can have adoptive parents, you can have any number of foster parents. FAMC, this one, it says that runs on Indie Birth FAMC or Indie Adopt FAMC. This is the good one. It's the one that's on the 2 line, 0, 1, 2 that I showed you. This one, there's no event linked. So we got to figure out where the birth is, and then this code supposedly was supposed to create a birth event or find a birth event or something, because the FAMC tag is not actually linked to that birth event, if there even is one, because GEDCOM doesn't require you to have a birth event for everybody. So basically we got to find out if there is a birth event, and if so, we got to link it to that birth event. Link what? The couple. This is linking the couple, the parents, or the fam, as GEDCOM calls it. Then if there is not a birth event, then we've got to create one. Okay, now in the import program, we've already created a birth event for everybody. This is old code that I've turned off. See, I'm just returning it. It's not doing anything. There's a good chance this code doesn't work right. What actually runs this is finding the right tag. For example, do offspring event, Control F. Fam pointer child event. This is the translated tag. This starts out as FAMC, I mean, and then it gets translated to this because it's on a 2 line. It's subordinate to a birth event or an adoption event. This is on a 1 line. It's subordinate to a 0 line. Now, let's say that the person who wrote the GEDCOM export program didn't put the FAMC down underneath the birth event. Now, here's a case where you see that people are generally or maybe always putting the FAMC at the very bottom of the INDI record. And I'm thinking there's a good reason for that, even though the specs don't tell you to, because they are needing to do what I'm needing to do here and detect the birth event and connect something to that birth event. If GEDCOM requires something to be done in order for GEDCOM to work right, in other words, if they require the FAMC to come somewhere under the birth, in other words, the birth event already exists, then the specs should say so, but they don't. But I'm suspecting that that is the case, that there's a convention that people have learned by trial and error that you have to put the FAMC under the birth. In our case, we probably don't have to because we're going to create the birth event anyway. We always create a birth event for everybody that's put into the tree. Conceivably, and this could happen, and the specs don't say you can't do it, you could have this situation like this. Here's your 0 line. That's a 0. There's your blah, 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 and after your blah, blah, blah comes your tag. They could just do this. Oh, come on. They could just go directly, and there's your blah, blah, blah over here, your pointer. Anyways, they could conceivably just go immediately from your 0 to your FAMC. They could. And maybe somebody does. Maybe some Genieware vendor does that when they export GEDCOM, and in which case there's trouble. Because here, there's not going to be any event ID, because it starts out as none. If there's no event yet, then we got nothing to link this to. So we should provide for that eventuality and not depend on some convention that has grown up amongst GEDCOM importers and exporters that they know about that's not in the specs. We can't rely on that sort of thing. Current event ID, there is such a thing. As we read through the events, each one that is created becomes the current event, and then we're in that current event subrecord as we do its subordinate tags, and that comes in real handy. But they're putting these one FAMC lines down at the very bottom underneath all the events, in which case the birth event is usually the first event in the GEDCOM. So it's the self-doc current event is going to be irrelevant lots of times. So we can't really base anything on that. What we have to do is we have to detect a birth event when we make it and save the birth event with the person ID. Now, this is wrong. We're returning based on current event ID, but like I said, current event ID could be anything because this FAMC is down at the bottom of the INDI record usually. So the current event ID is just the last event that you put in. It's not the birth event. So if we're going to do something like this, then we need to have something called self.birth ID. So this is basically old code. The best thing to do with old code is not look at it. So we're going to write some new code here. When we come upon an FAMC, we'll see if the person has a birth event yet. I need to find where we make a birth event. Make event, there's 4 of them. Let's see what it is. So we've translated all the event tags instead of birth, death, like that, and then having some of them be generic events. You start out with the tag even, translate them all into tags that start with even, and then the second part of the tag is going to be like birth or death or residence or whatever. So if this is a general read through, we're reading through the whole file after the tags have been translated. And then if the tag is an event, we're going to do this. Otherwise, we're going to find out what function to run by looking in a dictionary. So this is what runs do event. And then inside of do event, we run make event, which is right here. Because there's a difference between an event in a family record and an event in an individual record. It's one of the complications of GEDCOM. And it's possible that this code could be parameterized and made simpler, but I'm not at that stage. I'm at the stage where I keep everything very separate and easier to read. if we're in an individual record, we're going to make an event. Here's your event type ID. There's a point at which we go through and actually create a birth for everybody that exists. We need to go there and create our little collection of births. So we need to find out when that actually happened. Oh, there you go. So read 3 happens before. Oh, I see. This is missing birth. So we go through anybody that doesn't have a birth event yet. We're going to go through and make one. How this works right now is that while we're reading the GEDCOM, which happened before this, because this is right now, this is like the last thing that happened. While we're reading the GEDCOM, when you come upon an event, you put it in a dictionary, which is called events. That dictionary right there. And then the key inside that dictionary, the main key, is an event ID, whatever happens to be the current event that you're reading in the GEDCOM. So we start out with an empty list called existing births, and as we read through the dictionary of events, which has already been created, then if there is already a birth event for the person, we add a dictionary to this list which references that person. When we've gone through the whole events dictionary, existing births is going to tell us who already has birth events and who needs to have one created for them. What if, instead of returning on that FAMC tag, the one FAMC, instead of just skipping it over, how about if we just create a collection at that point which has the family pointer? This is what I'm calling one FAMC. It's linked directly to the INDI for some reason. And in a case where this is the only FAMC and you don't have this sensible one over here that's linked to the event, then at this point we are just returning on that function. We're not doing anything. When we find this tag, we should do something and put this family link and this INDI link, in other words, the couple and the person, the parents and the person, in a separate collection. When we're doing our last step, we can refer to that collection here. Okay, see, we're returning on this. We're not running any of this code or this code, and we don't want to. We're going to comment all this code and hopefully not even look at it anymore. This is GEDCOM import class. Let's make us a blank collection self dot fancy to INDI links equals. Now I think this is going to solve that other problem I mentioned, where if the person who wrote the export program put their FAMC tag above the birth event, then it won't matter anymore. So that's good. And the reason it won't count is because this is going to be done very last. This is what we've got. This has been translated. This is the actual tag we're going to see here. So it's really this. I think this is what we're really going to see. In other words, num tag value. This is num tag value. This is a couple pointer, family pointer, or couple foreign key. So we're going to need a person ID, which is going to be equal to, we can just go get it, it's easy. This is how you look back at previous lines, self.supers. Use it to go back to the 0 tag. There's a tag and a value. This is the value. 0 here would be the tag itself, and this would be the value, which is a person ID because the 0 tag was INDI. Okay, and like I said, num tag value is num tag values. This is the other value that we need. It happens to be 1 here, but that's a couple ID. Person that's born, the parents. Now this runs on one FAMC. Now we want to copy the name of this. We got to reference this list which we have just created very easily, and we've got to reference it in that method that does missing stuff. This one, make missing birth events. And we decided we want to do this here, right? Now what are we going to do with it? When are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? I don't think this is going to be hard at all. I think this is going to be much easier than what I was trying to do before. The question is, what are we trying to do? Well, that's when I have to sit back and redefine my goal so that I actually have some idea of what I'm trying to do. Up to now, the purpose of missing birth events is to make a birth event for everybody. We're going to have them born at the age of 0, and we're going to use the right event type. That's going to be 1, but we're going to detect it from the database instead of knowing that it's 1, because we don't like the hard code stuff in case it changes, whatever. Person ID, we've got a person ID. Persons is a global dictionary, like events. Events is also a global dictionary. So what we have not done here is we have not added the person's parents, and this is what we're trying to do here. Now, since we have access to a person ID here, we can use that person ID to find the parent link in here. The question is, we'd want to do it for every person, doing it here, or do we want to do it for only the person that we're making births for? Do it here. Looking back at the GEDCOM, got your 2 FAMCs here. This is for his birth. Well, there's 3 in this case, but let's not look at the adoption. We look at the birth, and there's already a birth event for this guy. In this case, we don't need to do anything. We don't need to do anything because it doesn't do anything for us. We've already got this. So if there is no to FAMC, which is linked to the birth event, then that's what we're doing. We're going through looking for stuff where this does not exist in the GEDCOM. And so we can put this as a birth event, but we're already making the birth event, but we're missing this. We're missing the couple. So we're only going to do this for missing births. That's the answer to my question. Okay? Then we're not going to do it for everybody because we'd just be overriding. We're going to do it for missing births. And that's why they're missing, because there's no to FAMC line in the GEDCOM. I'm going to do a loop. Person ID, couple ID equals top. If person ID equals P ID, then couple ID equals C ID. In which case we want to stop looping, break out of the loop while we got the right stuff. And then we want to save that. We're actually looping through persons, but we can refer to events. Because we've got a current event ID, we're going to call this a couple FK, and we're going to save the couple ID which we just discovered in the dictionary and go test it and see what happens. We're going to do the testing in the next movie. So thanks for dropping by, and in fact your being here has really helped me focus my imagination a little bit. And I don't think I did quite as much daydreaming as I normally would, just because you were here to hold my hand and breathe down my neck or whatever it was you were doing. But anyway, thanks for showing up. I'll see you in the next movie. We're going to test this, see if it works.